Debbie, will you let me know if you see Samuel Fiapito?
Will do.
I see that we're waiting for Director Morris. All right. All right. Good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and call the regular board meeting scheduled for Tuesday, February 22, 2022 to order. And so we'll go ahead and begin with roll call. So Director Hoover.
Here.
Director Buller-Jack is out absent. Director Morris.
Here.
Director Larson.
Here.
And do we have our student representative, Samuel Fiapito, here tonight? We'll welcome him when he arrives. And I'd like to go ahead and welcome all guests, and Carly will lead the next section.
Thank you so much, Bridget. So good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to open it up by acknowledging our group agreements that come from the Courageous Conversations. So these agreements are stay engaged, experience discomfort and be vulnerable, speak your truth, expect and accept non-closure. Before we move on to the land acknowledgement, I did want to just take a moment to acknowledge a few things. So first, these are an amazing set of agreements, but they're just words on paper until they are put into practice and they're put into action. We missed an opportunity as a board to put these agreements, these courageous conversation moments into practice. On February 8th, we as a board were given the opportunity to celebrate the contributions of and uplift Black voices, experience, and accomplishment. Unfortunately, this resulted in a reinforcement of white supremacy norms and harm to members of our community, staff, and students. While the responsibility of this harm does not lie fully with me, my action, or lack thereof, spoke volumes. I missed the opportunity to practice these norms of courageous conversations to disrupt anti-Blackness, and I allowed the perpetuation of racial harm. And instead, I just shared my own recognition and stayed silent, one of the most harmful mechanisms of whiteness. For this, I'm truly sorry. To the community members who I let down, I am sorry. As a member of the school board, we have not just a responsibility, but an obligation to recognize the power and privileges that we hold and act in ways, not just in our words, but in our actions that actively disrupt and dismantle harmful racial oppression throughout our systems. While I will not always be perfect, I won't always see things due to my own privilege, I commit to doing better, to calling out injustices in the moment, not letting those go by and perpetuate the harm that I know so deeply impacted people on February 8th. I want to work towards our collective power and uplifting the collective power of the BIPOC individuals throughout our diverse community. So with that, I'd like to also open up if there are any other members of the board who have anything else that they would like to share or add as we reflect on the impact and the harm of February 8th.
So I agree with Director Hoover's sentiments, and want to just acknowledge the need for, as a board, we got a lot of communication related to what happened at the last meeting, and I think we need to have a formal board response to that. And one of the ways that we can do that is through what's called it's a resolution. So boards can communicate formally through these resolutions. In this particular case, it would be called a censure resolution. And so what happens is that in the censure resolution, we would acknowledge that the harm has been caused, and that in fact it's not, some of the things that happened were not consistent with in particular our race and equity policy, which talks about, among other things, ensuring each TSD site is welcoming and inclusive to all members. So I would recommend that as we go forward, that we consider, kind of in response to the community input that we received, we develop this resolution and to again acknowledge the harm that was done, and to indicate that it's not consistent with our policies.
And I appreciate Carly's words, and I fully support Dave's suggestion. And I apologize for anything that I may have said or done that offended anyone in any way. That it's never our intent, but.
So I'm going to share something from my heart, and just a sort of what I sort of found myself falling back into after the hurt that happened last meeting. And I'm going to start with a quote. "Far often people think of themselves just individuals, separate from one another, whereas you are connected, and what you do affects the whole world. When you do well, it spreads out, and it's for the whole of humanity." This was from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And so what I wrote was, "Sit down, stay quiet, and don't cause any trouble." At 14 years old and a sophomore in high school, I walked up to the teacher and whispered to them that I did not want to be there and I did not want to complete the assignment. The teacher's response was, "Well, go sit down, stay quiet, don't cause any trouble." Now, the licensed therapist and college professor who's training the next generation of counselors and social workers, I know now that student was a young person in pain, a young person who could not focus on learning because of much pain in their lives. And the words I now know as an invitation to help. The 14-year-old student learned that having needs was to be silenced. Speaking up was causing trouble, and expressing that something was not right or okay, that Black and Brown students' needs are not valued. They are a problem. Since then, and throughout my career in education and health systems, I have witnessed time and time again where people who speak up and alert those with privilege and power a need to improve, that what is happening is wrong and people are harmed. And so they are harmed. They're ignored, they're silenced, and they're dismissed by people who want the status quo. I ask each of us, how did you respond? How do you show up each day to identify, acknowledge, and to work to heal the racial trauma? This is what racial trauma is. Racial trauma occurred every time I walked into that classroom with that teacher because he wanted me to be invisible and silent. In his privilege, he wanted the status quo. He did not want to be uncomfortable and serve all students. He viewed me not as a worthy, amazing scholar leader in the making. He viewed my needs as a nuisance and wanted to maintain the status quo. It happened until I quit school and left home by the end of the semester. I was not going to stay where I was not treated as if I did not matter. How many thousands of Black and brown students have been treated like that and will continue to be harmed because of how people in education cause this trauma, and by not acting on it, continue to perpetrate the trauma. And colleagues are not holding colleagues accountable for the harm done. So the racial trauma continues into my third year, witnessing or being a target of racialized trauma again and again. And the last meeting, I was hurt in hopes that each board member would be able to understand the impact and anti-Black racism caused harm. I made calls to each of my colleagues. 2 members on the board ended that call by saying, "I'm sorry," and wanted to know what could be done to heal the anti-Black racism and harm caused. Over 90% of the students and families served are BIPOC. How is it representative that 80% of the board do not have BIPOC identities? In educational leadership, we ought to be creating space for the next generation of leaders. How is it that we're not, as a board, English language learners? How is it that we do not have a community member on our board who has an immigrant or migrant identity? As a Filipina mestiza mom of Tukwila scholars, I'm standing in solidarity with our Black scholars, families, staff, and educators. You are deserving of leadership who will demonstrate cultural responsiveness, who will use any power and privilege a leader has to transform the structures in our district that perpetuate harm. You are deserving of the healing and honor of the brilliance that you bring every day to this district. This is the racial equity competency work needed by every director, every administrator, every teacher and staff serving youth, serving colleagues and families in Tukwila. So to every Black and scholar of color, family and staff that has been told by someone in education that you need to sit down, stay silent, and don't cause trouble, or has been traumatized by a teacher or community leader, and for those colleagues and families with identities with privilege in our schools who witness students, families, colleagues who are harmed by being dismissed, ignored, and silenced. I sent her a few quotes from the politician and civil rights advocate Elijah Cummings in honor of Black History Month. Did we stand on the sidelines and say nothing? Do not be quiet. You are to get up and get into good trouble, necessary trouble. The mission is one that comes out of a vision that was created long, long ago. It is a mission and a vision to empower people, to make people realize that the power is within them, and they too can do the things that they want to do. Thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the land recognition with Director Morris.
Thank you, Bridget. We in the Tukwila School District acknowledge that the land where we teach, collaborate, learn, and play is the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and the Muckleshoot people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and Muckleshoot tribes. As a public school district, we have the responsibility for the stewardship of this land, and we recognize the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people who have been living and working here since time immemorial.
Bridget, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Morris. So the next item on number 2 is approval of the agenda, and there is a modification to the agenda. On 7D, the technology plan update, I believe, is going to be tabled at this time. And I don't know, Dr. Herndon, if you have anything else to share with the board on why we're removing it.
Also 9B, that's the action item
9B.
associated with that. Yes, so just having gone through that particular piece, also hearing plenty of community feedback, we need to do some additional work on that plan. So we're going to pull that, bring that back. This is not an item that is time sensitive and needs to be approved tonight. So I'll give some updates on when that will appear again, but I'll be working with Mr. Baker on improving additional feedback and reflection on that particular item.
And so I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the agenda with modifications to remove items 7B and 9B from the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I heard all ayes. All right, we'll go ahead and move along to public comment. And before we start that,
Director Mapoa Ryder, I see our student rep has joined us, so you wanted to recognize him?
yes, thank you. So welcome Samuel Fiapito. Samuel Fiapito is our student representative. So welcome this evening, Samuel.
Thank you for having me.
Debbie, is it possible to put the audience participation policy up just for a moment before we start reading public comments?
Do you want the new one or the?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, the current one that I'll read a statement from it. Sorry.
Yeah, let me grab
Our
that one for
original.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see that?
Yes. All right. So I'm just going to read a couple statements and then alert the board. The president, so I'm just going to read this statement, and this is: the president may interrupt or terminate an individual statement if it's too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. Any director may challenge the president's ruling by interrupting or terminating an individual statement. The president's ruling may be overruled by a majority vote. And I made the determination that every single public comment that came in, even though it includes specific names, is valid, and in terms of really not, and that we will read them all. And if any director wants to challenge that, I just feel free to do so. And if we need to vote on it, just let me know. So at any given time, just let me know. All right, go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, we have 4 public comments tonight. This one is from Tukwila Children's Foundation. It says, "Dear Tukwila School District leaders, in February, we as a community have an opportunity to focus on the importance of Black history and Black culture in the United States. We appreciate the district's efforts to highlight this vital part of American culture that may be overlooked. Leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Bayard Rustin, Malcolm X, Marsha P. Johnson, James Baldwin, Shaka Khan, Colin Kaepernick, and others have challenged systemic oppression to achieve liberty, justice, and equity for all. Unfortunately, there were recent actions made by the Tukwila School District that did not uphold the values of equality and created harm for our students and families. Some teachers at Showalter Middle School did not participate in events during Solidarity Week. On February 8th, 2022, some comments were made at the school board meeting that propagated racial harm in our community. Although we can understand the intent of these actions, the impact is harmful and destructive. These actions do not align within our community values of inclusion, integrity, service leadership, and togetherness. These actions do not nurture a community where our children and families' needs are met. These actions are indicators of an ongoing culture within the Tukwila School District that continues to fuel implicit bias and racism against our students and families. This must be eliminated now. As one of the most diverse school districts in the nation, we can no longer accept destructive practices that harm our community. It is essential to acknowledge the harm and take actionable steps to heal. We sincerely hope that all Tukwila School District staff, administration, and volunteers do the work in identifying your individual implicit bias. Learn about the historical inequities in our community and how your words and actions can heal or further harm our diverse communities. Apply your knowledge to undoing systemic racial barriers in our community that limit the educational opportunities for our students. Without taking actionable steps, we will not achieve the vision we see for our Tukwila community. To those in our community that were harmed by the actions of the Tukwila School District, we are sorry. These actions do not reflect the values of the community. We can do better and we will do better. Tukwila leaders have the opportunity to heal with purpose and eliminate racism in all its forms in our school district. We continue to look forward to partnering with you as we serve our diverse community. The next one is from Angela Meyer. Good evening, my name is Angela Meyer and I am the office manager at Cascade View Elementary. I wanted to express my concerns over the comment made by Director Bolerjack at the February 8th, 2022 board meeting. The Tukwila School District is supposed to be one of the most diverse school districts in the nation, yet it seems like the racism in this district is getting worse. Over the last 8.5 years, the district has been found by the federal government to have caused racial discrimination, been called out by the NAACP for racist hiring practices, and nearly 3 years ago, the board was called out by the students and staff at Foster for ongoing racism. And from what I have seen, not much has changed. In fact, I believe the problem is getting worse. I have listened to the recording of the February 8th board meeting and was incredibly disturbed by the comments made by 2 members of the board. Director Larson started by stating, anyone that was interested in recognizing someone appropriate, that's in quotes, appropriate for Black History Month could. What constitutes being appropriate enough to be recognized during Black History Month? Once again, a white person is making the rules and saying it's okay to recognize a Black person as long as it does not make the white person uncomfortable. I believe Director Larson owes the board and community an apology. Director Bolerjack needs to be removed from the TSD school board. In listening to her recognition, she did not understand what the assignment was. No, her 1 minute and 16-second statement spoke volumes. She used her white privilege and sense of white entitlement to further increase the racial division and hurt that is so widespread in the district. One of the bullet points of the Race and Equity Committee's mission statement is to support all members of our Tukwila School District community to hold each other accountable so that we hold students first and meet students where they are. Director Bolerjack needs to be held accountable. Her story was a slap in the face, not only to our students and staff, but to the community as a whole. Not only did she touch another student without consent, but she had to emphasize that she had very, very dark skin. And the reason she touched her, because she didn't think she felt the same as she and her other white classmates. She has now said the quiet part out loud, and her white privilege was the megaphone. Because of the further harm and trauma her story has caused, she should not be able to retain her position. How will our students, staff, and community be able to trust her? How do we know that she will stand up for our BIPOC students, staff, and community against racist actions? The trust has been broken and is beyond repair. If Director Bolerjack will not step down on her own, she must be recalled and replaced. We need a board that represents the community. I believe, along with Director Bolerjack, that Director Morris and Director Larson need to step down to allow for new appointments to be made with members of the community that better represent the diversity of the Tukwila School Board, of the Tukwila School District. This next one is from the Asian American Teachers of Showalter Middle School Race and Equity Team. To the Tukwila School Board and Tukwila community. February is a month to specifically honor the significant yet unsung Black leaders and contributors to our society. Our students and families deserve and need this. To hear school board directors Larson, Apoa Ryder, and Hoover recognize and share in detail their personal connections to their selected examples of Black excellence shows they understood the need and call. To hear Director Bolerjack choose not to recognize a Black figure and instead center themselves, a white person in power, with a personal anecdote of touching an unnamed girl's dark skin and realizing that we are all the same as a way to legitimize their refusal to center Blackness was sickening and harmful. Director Bolerjack's decision and statements reinforce a long history of erasure and silencing the BIPOC identity. This is akin to the All Lives Matter and I Don't See Color narratives that tell BIPOC individuals to hide their identities rather than be proud of them and to ignore the current and historical realities of being BIPOC in America. At Showalter, staff has engaged in book studies such as How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi and Courageous Conversations by Glenn E. Singleton, implementing their recommendations and practices into our professional development and staff meetings. Many of our staff, supported by the district, have attended additional race and equity learning opportunities during the school year. Our superintendent and chief academic officer wrote district-wide emails encouraging work that centers Blackness during the month of February, even providing resources to use in the classroom. We expect district leaders to, at the very least, be on par with their staff's learning and growing rather than behind, especially if those leaders have participated in race and equity conferences themselves. They should know better by now. And we, who make up Tukwila's diverse, complex, and constantly evolving community, deserve better. We deserve leaders who consistently demonstrate respect and humility toward our identities and our humanity, and who will learn, adapt, and fight for us. Director Bolerjack holds one of the greatest positions of power in our district, one that impacts the entire Tukwila community. This is an immense responsibility. Our district consists of 86% BIPOC students and 28% BIPOC teachers. We do not trust Director Bolerjack to support us and other BIPOC staff. We do not trust Director Bolerjack to set an example of anti-racist leadership or hold other leaders accountable to combating white supremacy. And most importantly, we do not trust Director Bolerjack to serve our students. We must hold our leadership accountable for what they do and what they refuse to do. When we allow behavior like this to continue, other leaders in the district and in the school buildings, such as teachers, are enabled to continue doing the same harm to our students. Therefore, we believe Director Bolerjack should step down and resign. I have one more. It is from the, well, I'll just start out. We, members of the white staff of Foster High School, are writing to demand the immediate resignation of Director Jan Bolerjack. Her comments in regards to celebrating Black excellence at the February 8th, 2022 board meeting make clear that she is unfit to serve in a position that necessitates a deeper understanding of the impacts of white supremacy in her schools and district. We support our Black colleagues, students, and community members who have expressed concern, frustration, and hurt due to Bowler Jack's comments. First and foremost, we as white staff recognize our power and privilege in our institutions and school buildings. It should be recognized by white people throughout the district that whiteness carries privilege. Therefore, it is our responsibility to not only call out racism and racist acts anytime they are present within our community, but to also work to create space in our community and institutions that are deemed safe by our BIPOC students, staff, and community members. On a school board that is majority white, representing the needs of a community that is not, our directors need to be exemplars in this work. Failure from the top can only lead to failure throughout the system. Racism is a consistent and unrelenting issue that many of our students and colleagues in the Tukwila School District experience. The responsibility of calling out racism and racist acts has always fallen on the shoulders of BIPOC staff and students. We, as white members of this community, must work to understand and recognize this unacceptable truth. There are white folks in the district who refuse to step up and/or are unable to acknowledge the harm that is being done to members of our BIPOC community. They must step down if they are unable to provide true and meaningful co-conspiratorship in supporting BIPOC members of our community when harm is being done. During what was supposed to be a celebration of Black excellence in which directors were honoring outstanding Black contributions in history or in the present, Director Bolerjack showed an inability to center or even acknowledge Black humanity during her comments. To serve in such an important position in a district such as ours and have such a lack of understanding of one's power and privilege is inexcusable. We hope that Director Bolerjack understands that the only appropriate action now is her resignation from the Tukwila School District Board of Directors. The undersigned members, white staff of Foster High School support our colleagues in demanding this resignation for the following reasons. Director Bolerjack clearly centered herself, her whiteness, and her power during a time that was meant to celebrate Black excellence. Director Bolerjack's story included a child whom she could not recall any information about except that they had dark skin. Director Bolerjack speaks only about touching this child's skin and how it made Director Bolerjack feel as someone who is not in community with non-white people. This story stripped this child of their humanity and once again centered herself and her whiteness. Someone who displays the values described above does not have the judgment necessary to safely lead our diverse school district. We will only continue to see harm being done to our BIPOC students and colleagues as long as values such as these persist within the community. We hope that it is clear to the board and Director Bolerjack that the best way to respond to this situation and to support the Tukwila community is for Director Bolerjack's resignation. Our district's leadership must be able to understand the complexities of privilege and act in ways that reflects this understanding. And then it's signed by several staff members. That's all the public comments.
So on behalf of the school board, I just want to honor the wisdom and expertise from our community, as well as for those that have contacted us on email and have sent messages to us. We cannot initially respond. However, as Director Larson had shared, really as a board, we'll need to future look at what next steps will be. So thank you. We'll go ahead and move along to the reports. The first is Superintendent Report. I think I heard one of our directors, did that letter have names listed from staff on the public comment?
Yes.
Can you read those names, please?
I need to pull the letter back up. Just one moment, please.
It looks like Carly just, is that from Carly who shared? Wrote the names in the chat to honor the staff who participated in that.
Oh,
You
she
wanna
did write the names and
Yeah.
staff? Okay.
They're in there. Read them.
Thank you, Carly.
You're welcome. I just sent it again to everyone so that participants who are attending can see them as well.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right, we'll move along. Appreciate that. We'll move along to Superintendent Report.
Great, thank you. Just want to again acknowledge that ongoing work within the district is always multifaceted. The areas that we're talking about tonight, the areas we've been dealing with for the last 2 years around COVID, and all of the areas that preceded COVID and will happen after COVID. There's always ongoing work, personally and professionally. So I look forward to continuing doing that work with staff and community. For this last couple of weeks, I've been getting out to buildings, into the classrooms to see various implementations of hopefully some of the increases in communication, PPE, COVID mitigation strategies that we've had there. It's been a great opportunity to just have some informal conversations. I always would suggest to people, anytime you have an opportunity to visit a classroom, it's a great place to be. It's the reason why we're here. It's to see our students, and it's fantastic to always be out there. So I was mainly targeting for the last week or two some of the younger grades. So I got an opportunity to go into pre-K and kindergarten classrooms. Those are great, as well as a 5th grade classroom. So received some good feedback from teachers, saw some very exciting students who love to be in class. And even though I do get some comments from time to time about students and staff maybe not always following all of our mitigation strategies around proper mask wearing, the ones I've seen in the hallways so far, those have all been pretty good. So I know most students and staff do try and maintain that as much as possible. And so that's something I'll touch upon in the next piece in the COVID-19 report. But I do appreciate everybody following that particular guidance, trying to keep everybody safe in our schools. The other area that I wanted to touch upon, I know this week is midwinter break, so we have students and staff out through Wednesday, and then we'll resume class again on Thursday and Friday. Then we have quite a stretch of class until we have spring break. So I know this is a stretch where there's a whole lot of activities happening. We have some of our assessments that are happening. So I realize this can be a very stressful time coming up. It seems like there are not a lot of breaks that happen as we kind of have most throughout the year. Had a couple of breaks that happen and kind of chop up the calendar. But we are entering into a challenging time just on the stress level. So I just want to acknowledge that that's something we also want to make sure we're paying attention to. And lastly, at least for the superintendent report, I'll be attending a conference coming up this weekend. And it's actually talking about the impacts of COVID and what we've learned from it. There are several different strands that they're looking at. One is just kind of the implementation of being back in person. There are a couple other strands just around school design and the impact of that, technology implementation and use by students. So it should be fascinating. It brings people from all over the country. So at the next board meeting, next time I have a superintendent's report, I'll put in some information there about what I've learned being on this particular panel. So I find it fascinating. One of the representatives there will actually be from New York City Public Schools, the largest school district in the country with over 1 million students. So I'm very curious to see what lessons they've learned from COVID in New York. That's the extent of what I have for the superintendent's report.
Can I ask a question, Bridget? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so I know this is kind of relates to COVID. However, just because it is more specifically related to you, I know you've been putting out surveys to staff around COVID, but specifically getting input on communication. And so I was curious, since you aren't able to share the specific results of the survey with us just yet, hopefully you can kind of give us an overview of what you've been hearing, the good and the bad, how our staff receiving the communication changes that have been happening. Is it being received well? And have you gotten some good feedback about opportunities for continued growth?
Yes, thank you. I forgot to mention that since our last time as well, we've had our communication directors, Carrie Martin, starting, which has been fantastic. Yes, so the surveys that I've been putting out to staff have received, again, some areas to continue to improve upon, but also some successes there as well. The number of people saying that they have felt or seen the increase in communications is definitely up, which is helpful. I think having the dedicated contact tracers, quarantine specialists is helpful, as well as putting out information weekly. So that's helpful. There are some people who also still comment that there are still some gaps in the communication. So I just want to make sure we're continuing to get that feedback about which gaps might be missing there. So it's some work I'm continuing to do with the principals as well to make sure that that's happening at the building level as well as at the district level. So yes, there are certain areas, part of that I touched upon, which is some of the feedback around proper wearing of masks and social distancing. Some of that not happening in some places. For other places, they say they've seen some improvement. So it's kind of a mix. And then in the next report, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the feedback I've had around masks and what we heard from the governor's announcement in King County Department of Health as well.
Just one follow-up. What's kind of been the average response that you've been getting for those from those surveys?
It's about, I'd probably say about 70-ish staff responding.
It's about a third, is that right?
More,
under?
probably a quarter.
A quarter, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, one last thing. Are they fairly consistently the same folks that you've noticed are filling them out, or is it an anonymous survey?
Yeah, it's anonymous. So
Okay.
it comes in. I can see like the number of people from the buildings. So I just compare
Okay.
kind of, elementary, secondary level.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we ready
Right.
for that section?
Let's do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
COVID-19.
COVID-19. So the big news really here, we did put out a communication last week. The big news around COVID-19 is the governor's announcement about the state plan to drop the indoor masking requirement as a state mandate beginning March 21st. So in that particular announcement, he had also talked about the local jurisdictions of health. So for us, that'd be King County Department of Health. However, could still maintain that there needs to be either mitigation strategies or mandates. So local health authorities have that ability to do that. And shortly after the governor's announcement, King County Department of Health also had chimed in to say, well, we're not quite ready to lift that indoor mask mandate yet. I think they're going to continue to look at the trends. The governor did put up a couple of charts about the descending trends of positive cases and hospitalizations, but even within that, there was no particular benchmark or a number to say if we get to here, this is what would be guiding us. He also did mention that in the future, it's possible that, mandates may have to come back again, or he may just leave that to the local jurisdictions, which are usually county led. So with that, we'll continue to have close conversations with King County Department of Health. But even until then, all of the mitigation strategies and mandates are still in place. So all of the masking, indoor masking, and social distancing, all the current policies and mitigation we have in place are all still in place at a bare minimum until March 21st. But I would probably guess that it'll go beyond that because King County Department of Health always seems to err on the more cautious side of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if they extend that beyond March 21st. There were a couple of school districts before last Wednesday who had voted as their own policies to lift indoor mask mandates for their schools. Unfortunately, that's not really up to them to make that decision because the state mandate is actually the law. So they were voting to do something at the local level, but the governor and state superintendent were pretty clear in pointing out that that really wasn't within their power to make that decision. Of course, they could vote on that. And in both of those cases, I think there were 3-2 votes, or one was a 3-0 vote and 2 board members abstained. So both of those districts were in Eastern Washington. Not that it casts any particular, kind of predisposition about geography and where people might vote, but I just thought it was interesting to hear some of the justification about the vote and why they decided to vote that particular way. But there are some consequences. The state superintendent had stated previously that schools or districts that didn't follow the mask mandate did run the risk of losing their student apportionment. So that obviously has an impact on the budget. So for us, what I had heard from King County Department of Health was they were looking to most likely update any particular new guidance March 6th. So that's still about 2 weeks away. And what I would like to do is have another community listening session with King County Department of Health. I'll be contacting Sarah Regal at King County Department of Health to see if we can do another community session during that week. And then hopefully whatever new guidance they have, we can at least have a discussion about what that might look like. If they have any new timeframes, if they're altering anything, if they are deciding to keep everything in place, if they've had any additional conversations with the State Department of Health. So during that conference call with the governor, the State Department of Health just kind of echoed what the governor was saying and said that local departments of health could decide to implement different strategies, but basically the state was stepping back from that. So still quite a bit to work through. There are other issues around this. Masking on buses is still a requirement because buses are kind of fall under federal jurisdiction. So the right now the federal mandate is to wear masks on all transportation systems. So our buses, even though the governor may have lifted the indoor mask mandate, masking on buses would still need to continue until the federal government relieves that mandate. And then there's also some work and clarity still to be done with labor and industry, because they had also chimed in during the governor's mandate, the state mandate portion. So I think there's still a lot of layers. That was just kind of the governor signaling a date in which the state would step back, but the impact on Tukwila still has yet to be determined. And of course, the board can have continuing conversations about mitigation strategies they may look that they might want to continue. And so I think having the conversations with Department of Health and our community would be excellent steps to figure out how we want to proceed. I don't know if Ms. Maestro is on the call or not, but she might have some additional details around PPE or tests. Those still remain well in stock for us. So Right now, it seems to be going well. If we need tests, we have them there. And I believe we're posting our data on our website to reflect number of cases or quarantines.
So I have two questions for you. Is that okay, Bridget? I don't know if you were going to say anything. Okay, two questions for you. One is, when we were in kind of the mix of Omicron at the beginning of January, there was an ask from the board around what the plan was to ensure that folks who were quarantining or not at school were getting access to their learning. In the heat of that, there was so much going on, and then we went to remote learning. So then, of course, everybody had access. So now that we're about 2 weeks into or post remote learning, in with our new COVID protocols, we've got, or not new COVID protocols, but solidified COVID protocols. We've got those quarantine specialists in place, those contact tracers in place. How is it going, and what information do you have around the amount of students that are currently out and where they are in their track to make sure that they have the information and the stuff they need to continue their learning at home?
Yeah, I don't have the hard numbers other than what would be reported on the website. I mean, I can certainly get that back to you by the end of the week. But from what I've heard, we sometimes receive an individual contact from someone to say, hey, my student doesn't have the ability to connect. And that's the job of the quarantine specialist, is to help that out. We also we wanted to make sure that the quarantine specialists could have that communication with different folks. So it's not just the principal or the teacher, it could also be a family liaison who's communicating that directly, because that then could hopefully speed up some of the problem solving, and that those folks can also communicate with technology around that. Additionally, they do have access to our varsity tutors, not only when they're out, but from some extended time, even when they get back into the classroom after quarantine.
So I'm just going to be honest, I'm a little bit concerned that we don't have more solidified numbers around this, because this was an ask that we specifically had at the beginning of January. We wanted a system to ensure that these things were being tracked, and what's on the website has nothing to do with if young people are absent, if they're getting instruction, right? What's on the website is just who's out, or not even who's out, but how many are out. So what I would love to see potentially is a direct correlation. These are the amount of students that are out. These are the ones that have been contacted, that are able to continue their learning right now. And these are the ones that aren't. And we're still trying, here's how we're actively trying to get in contact with them. Right now, I still just keep hearing a lot of, well, this is what in theory is happening, but not a lot of like concrete information to say, like, follow up for you to know that that's even happening. So that's just a little bit concerning for me. I hope that we can move that a little bit. My other thought around a COVID, and I know when the guidance changed around the 5-day quarantining, I know I shared some concerns with you about how that guidance changing was the minimum, and also how I was concerned about how we were going to operationalize that. Never really got answers to how it was being operationalized, except for there were discussions being had about how we could have outdoor lunch, but still never really got answered. So I'm hopeful that those young people actually who are returning back on day 6 aren't sitting in spaces with other folks. But that aside, I think this new mask mandate and the potential for this guidance changing, I think is a great opportunity for us to look at not what the guidance says, but what our community needs. And so I would really like to push that we take this month that we have right now, we have a month before we know this is going to happen, to really have conversations, not just one listening session with King County Public Health, but really have conversations, reaching out to staff, students, and parents, and get a sense for what feelings are coming up for them. As I've been thinking a lot about this mask thing, I mean, I'm excited that we may be lifting mask mandates. I think that's really great. And I think it is a sign that we are reaching a different level of pandemic, right? We're moving towards endemic stage. We are in King County 80% vaccinated, which is herd immunity. That's really amazing. And if we're thinking about mental health, this mask has been a source of safety and comfort for people. And so I worry that if we are not being really responsive in how we're communicating the what and the why beyond, well, the guidance just changed. The really the why of, you know, we're almost at public, we're almost at herd immunity. Here's what that means. Here's how we got there. And here's why we can really move into this next stage. I think that would be really valuable. And I think we have the opportunity in this time to do it. I think we're going to have a huge miss if we just wait until the guidance changes and then we just say, okay, no more masks or it's optional. So I really want to make sure that we're caring for the mental health of folks. Again, the last thing that we really need is to create additional worry or anxiety for our students who are already beyond anxious and worried about their safety and their academics.
I think you're muted, Director Powrider.
Thank you. I will go, so thank you, and we'll move along to the student and director reports, and we'll start with our student representative, Mr. Fiapito. Would you be willing to share a student report of what's going on in our community, and then go ahead and pass it to the next person you'd like to hear from?
Okay, so I don't really have much on my student report, but I do have throughout this month, well, throughout Black History Month, I feel that our school has done Foster has done a good job of celebrating Black History Month, because every morning announcement we have a person of the day where we honor black leaders that are like not very much seen on the media, as well as their careers and everything. Our teachers have also been teaching about Black activists and Black leaders all around, and they've been implementing that within our lessons plans. We've had a Valentine's Day Spirit Week, which was last week, which was nice because everyone dressed up and a lot of people showed school spirit. And we've also celebrated National School Counselors Week at Foster. Like, I'm pretty leadership. We had like a week. We had a whole week to plan like little stuff for our counselors, whether it be like little gift bags and coffee and donuts. And I feel like that was nice, and it's something that we hope we could continue. And yeah, we're also working on, and I believe our BSU is working on something big for Black History Month, but I'm pretty sure that'll take place next month because the month is almost over. And yeah, that's all I have for my student report.
Thank you, Mr. Fiapito. Who would you like to hear from next?
Director Hoover, please.
Okay, thank you. My report will be actually quite brief because y'all will hear more in detail what I've been working on when we get to some of the board discussion items. But I feel like I was just giving this report. This month has totally flown by. This is, of course, as I'm still 3 months in, I'm doing still a lot of balancing of learning while also really itching to do the work. And I feel really grateful for the opportunities I have been able to engage with community, to engage with students. One of the most cool things that I've done so far, literally the best experience so far, was the opportunity to go, and Director Larson spoke about this briefly. We had the opportunity to go to sit in on some civics classes. And so I had the opportunity to sit in on the 5th and 6th period, I believe, of Mr. Weisbecker's class. And man, I can't tell you just the energy and the amazing thoughtfulness. And I was just so inspired, as I always am anytime I'm in a space with young people. Just the solution-oriented approach that they had to the challenges that they were bringing forward to us. I would say I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised because youth are brilliant. So that was was a really amazing opportunity, and that sparked the beginning of the work that I've spent a good amount of time on over the last few weeks, gearing up to do some work around our gender inclusive spaces in our schools. And so with that, I was able to, Bridget, myself, and Mr. Weisbecker have been in connection. We had a meeting with a really fantastic student advocate who has been at Foster High School since September, really trying to advocate for more inclusive spaces, particularly around gender inclusive or gender neutral restrooms. And so really looking forward to, or really have been pleased with that partnership and look forward to working in more collaboration with them as we move this project forward. I'm having a we walked away from that meeting, and again, I'll share a lot more later, but we walked away from that meeting with a few specific goals, and one of them was for this student to gather other students who want to be a part of the process around policy making for gender inclusive spaces, and figuring out how we can make this a prominent staple of our district, throughout our district. And so on Thursday, I'm going to meet with several students at Foster and just start some conversations around this. So I'm really, really stoked about that. That has been the majority of my work over the last few weeks. And again, I'll share a lot more in detail about the gender inclusive spaces work in a little bit. So that's my report. And I will kick it to Director Morris.
I'm going to pass this evening. Thank you. So Dave?
Thank you. So I'm going to start by apologizing to Ms. Meyer and the community for my use of the word appropriate in connection with the Black History Month presentation. It was not my intent at all to set myself up as the arbiter of appropriateness for Black History Month. But thank you to Ms. Meyer for raising the issue, and I apologize for the harm caused by my use of the word appropriate. Second thing I wanted to talk about was recommend our neighboring district, Highline, the superintendent, Susan Enfield, who's stepping down at the end of this year, wrote a really great piece for a site called the74million.org, describing kind of what it was like to be a superintendent during these challenging COVID times. And I really recommend that people take a look at that, because it gives you appreciation for kind of what the leadership is going through at this time. And just want to thank our leader, Dr. Herndon, and recognize all the superintendents around this area who have worked together really well. I mean, intentionally worked together to get everybody through this difficult time. The other thing I wanted to just recognize was, so one of our community partners, Communities in Schools, was awarded a $5 million grant from the Mackenzie Scott Foundation. Mackenzie Scott is the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos and has been distributing a lot of her inherited wealth out. So congratulations to our partners, Communities in Schools. We look forward to them, maybe be able to provide some more services for us because of the great grant that they won. Did want to mention also, tomorrow I'm going to be meeting with the City of Tukwila Engineering Department to talk about work on the safety work that we were looking at relative to the South 144th Street Bridge, as well as South 156 or 152nd sidewalks. It's interesting, apparently the city did try and get a grant to address the safety issues on the South 144th Street Bridge a few years ago. It was a federal grant, they didn't get it, but anyway, it'll be interesting to sit down and maybe we can develop some collaboration to get that, the safety issues on that bridge addressed. And as Director Hoover has mentioned, it's always great to talk to our students. So I sat in on a couple of the civic sessions, and some of the issues that they brought up were the gender neutral bathroom, some issues related to the canceling of homecoming, an idea for a new CTE class in music production, an idea to that I mentioned kind of in the work session about having a universal ongoing survey mechanism available so students, staff, community can provide kind of a constant stream of input to the district and kind of have somebody in the district sort out where it needs to go, similar to kind of the Tukwila Works app that the city has. The other issue was blocking. I saw this in, I think, the technology plan, the issue of some websites being blocked that students need for or could use for some of their work. That's been an ongoing issue, as it's a tricky issue because the districts needs to block inappropriate sites. On the other hand, sometimes in the blocking software, sites that really shouldn't be blocked get blocked. So that's an ongoing issue. And of course, as always, whenever I've talked with students at Foster, is the issue of food and lunch and how all that's done. They have a lot of interest in that area. And of course, there's a whole bunch of issues about, COVID and masks and testing. And then the last one that was kind of flexible scheduling. Can we, are there some ways we can look at the scheduling to make it a little more flexible, so maybe they get more time in a class, or maybe they have some time for work, and that's a whole interesting area. So I guess my one thought on the civics, so we did send as a board a thank you note. What I'd like to see is us think about in maybe a month or two, just come back to them, and because a lot of these issues with when you go ask people things and then there's no kind of loop closing. So if we can come back in a month or two and say, here are some of these items, and I know we're working on a number of them, that here's what we've done about them, and here's what the district has done about them. I think that would be really good to come back to them and say that, we really did listen to you and we closed some loop on some of these issues. So maybe we can think about doing that in a month or two. So that's my report. So let's see, I guess we got Director of Writers, last one.
Yeah. And Dave, am I hearing interest in you championing such closing the loop process in terms of providing updates and what's happening in our district for the youth that we worked with a month ago?
Sure, I'm gonna need, obviously I need input from everything.
Yeah.
I don't know everything that's going
Yeah.
on. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to be the collector of information, and so that we can put such a memo together, sure.
Yeah. And so the director report I'm going to share this evening actually is in response to the concerns, the issues, the very relevant experiences of the students that I've had the opportunity to meet with this from both Foster and Showalter. And so one of the issues was related to satisfaction with breakfast and lunch. And I heard from multiple students that hot breakfasts are running out, good food is running out, food runs out, things like that. And I was in one meeting and Ms. Birdsong actually alerted that she would be working on that and looking into that. And so that was I just want to honor that responsiveness, because that seems to be pretty important. Heard from students about how harmful it is and how much it's hurting them to hear racial and other types of slurs. And then not only hearing them from other students, but adults are not responding in a helpful or healthy way for students. And so that just perpetuates the harm. So there's like several layers of harm that happens, not just the first time it's said, but when a student speaks up or asks for help and is ignored, each time that student comes across the other students who were able to get away with it, right? And they know it, right? That or haven't had those learning opportunities to be able to address such hurtful things. Students really talked about all of the mental health stress and the mental health issues and the lack of mental health resources and the struggles that have been experienced certainly before the last 2 years, but during the 2 years, and this stuff is still happening. And so really been focused on looking at different types of opportunities and to find funding, to find resources and connections in our community. And Dr. Herndon, the city of Tukwila, King County Public Health, we had like an initial kind of meeting. And one of the areas that for King County Public Health, one of their major public health crises is racism is a public health crisis, and mental health issues are a public health crisis. And so I'm hoping that that if we're going to have any narrative around COVID and the impacts of COVID, that narrative is not complete without acknowledging the impacts of racism and mental health impacts and trauma that has occurred during this time as well, and how that plays out in the overall health and wellness of all our community members. Director Hoover is going to be giving an update in terms of inclusive spaces, so I'll pause on that, but that also lots of wisdom from our students in terms of really what needs to happen, like ASAP, and then also not only at 1 or 2 schools, but really all our buildings. There ought to be gender inclusive spaces in all our buildings for all our students and staff. And then finally, I'll share, so the voices I'll bring forward are families. So had the opportunity with supporting partnerships in education and beyond, and this is formally the Somali Parent Education Board for those that are familiar with that name. There was a 3-day family meetup exchange, information and learning exchange that occurred. And so there were youth there were families there were also community leaders, and 3 days of really coming together and sharing experiences. And similar to what Dr. Hoover said, that the community also brought, ways to heal, ways to improve. And so I'll share some of the needs from our families. Families want to have access and to be in the schools. Families, aunties, uncles, bring all kinds of relevant experience, wisdom, and ability to work with educators to serve youth. And there are families that are feeling excluded or children are being harmed, and where they can step up and be that extra support and provide what some educators cannot, and prevent harm. Families are also very interested in supporting each other and connecting with each other and being able to, in terms of information sharing, resource sharing, that really in our district, I know that there's interest in sort of this idea of a parent council, but in Tukwila, even before a council can be formed, we really need to look at our culture and what is happening, why there are challenges in connecting with families. And so SPEB, and we do have some parents from Tukwila that participate in this community network. That is their jam. That is what they do. They're good at it. They've been brought in by Kent. They're currently being brought in by Highline and other places too, to actually help improve the culture, between the schools and families, so that there is a more inclusive, welcoming, and honoring space and relationship with each other. That is definitely something that I and I think many other people have a vision of improving in our district. And so hoping that that is something that we continue, and I'll also be working to continue trying to make sure that our students and staff have mental health resources that they're deserving of. And that is my director report. We'll go ahead and move along to legislative report.
Thank you. So on Monday, as the legislative session is coming towards the end in the next 2-3 weeks, and so they came out with the final bills that or the budget bills, the money bills at the end of the session. Both the House and the Senate came out with theirs. And so people are still digesting. These are like hundreds of pages document, digesting all the what's in them. But there will be, some more staff for nurses, social workers, counselors, psychologists. There will be some form of enrollment stabilization. So the original idea was to go back to the 2019 enrollment numbers prior to COVID. We probably won't get that. They're talking about somewhere between maybe 50% of that and the full amount. So we'll see where that ends up between the House and the Senate. A couple of bills I added this week are related to, at the bottom of the list that I have for the attachment here, House Bill 1115, which is language access. So this one is this one's still alive and going in both houses. Requires each district to implement a language access program to improve family and community access to district work. So this is right in line with a lot of our priorities, and hopefully there's going to be some dollars that come with that. My guesstimate looking at it now is it's maybe half to an FTE person along that, plus they'll be setting up a work group at the state level to provide some guidelines along that area. So that's a really interesting bill. Hopefully that one will get through. And then the last one I added on was House Bill 2078, which is going to provide grants for outdoor education programs. So for the it's targeted at 5th and 6th graders. So for us, we'd be able to tap into that for our 5th grade program. There was one interesting, occasionally in the budget bills, you get what's kind of called a carve out for a specific district. And I think as near as I can tell, Representative Berquist has in the House version, I mean, there has to still be the reconciliation between the House and Senate versions. So we'll see what comes out in the end. But some $148,000 specifically for Tukwila after school programs. So that's interesting. It'll be to see if it doesn't happen too often, but sometimes there are specific school district targeted dollars, and we'll have to see if that one makes it through the Senate. But I think the outdoor education, it's both in the Senate and the House bills. So that one looks like it should probably come through. There is a nice one in the Senate, which is learning assistance program, hold harmless. So this would allow, we get a lot of dollars in the learning assistance program, which is based on the number of students that qualify for free and reduced lunch. And this is another one that would be good to keep our numbers at the 1920 level rather than what they are currently after the COVID reduction. So hopefully there's a number of good things in the budget bills, and we'll have to see how it comes out in the end. But there's some good things in here, and hopefully that we'll get it in the end, and the governor will sign it. So anyway, that's my legislative report. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for Director Larson before we move along? Okay. Next item is number 5, consent agenda. May I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second, and a question. I just noticed that the minutes from February 8th, the board meeting weren't there yet. And I was just curious what the holdup was there and when we can expect those.
The holdup was I didn't have enough time.
There were a lot of meetings. Yeah, for sure. Okay, just wanted to.
Sorry about that.
No,
I tried.
that's okay. That's okay. That's why I wanted to ask. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. And yeah, no worries. Thanks, Debbie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No? All okay, it's unanimous. We'll move along to item 6, board discussion, and we'll start with policy 1430, public comment. And I guess I'll go ahead and just give a little bit of background on this one. So really looking at our existing policy really started after COVID happened. And it was something that when COVID shut in-person meetings down and everything went virtual, recognized that there was not any public comment happening and was curious about how other districts are doing it and how, what's working well, what's not working, and just started what's out there, what's happening. And so at that time, a written comment process was developed by the board while we were virtual, and that written process has limits around how many words, what time something needs to be submitted, and also really creates a lot of barriers for many people. And thinking about moving forward, if we are going to continue an aspect that is virtual and meeting in person, what that might look like, how might participants have opportunities to engage, so either through public comment or say a question comes up. At the end of the meeting, is there opportunity to submit questions that then at a future meeting could be answered, or that the district could, I think it was Director Larson had mentioned a little earlier in our meeting, opportunities that if somebody has a question, who could they connect with? How could they get the answer? So very much that same type of sentiment. And so started talking with other boards to find out, how are things working? Identified a few model policies to update our existing policy. And so hence came the drafted public comment policy, and some of the important changes that were integrated in this is that there would be opportunity for community presentation, so that if there was a student group, a community-based organization that wanted to be able to maybe do a limit, like a presentation at the beginning, would be able to do that before we begin our board work. It also had opportunities every meeting for student comments as well. And then also looking at not only opportunities to have either written or verbal opportunities to give public comment at the beginning, also at the end, there would be opportunities. And then trying to think if there's any. Carly, feel free to jump in here if there's anything else that comes to mind of translation. Yes. So if there is a community member that would like a translation, there would be time considerations for translation as well. And
yeah, the only other thing to add is, in addition to public comment, we wanted to provide people opportunities to submit questions, because we know that as conversation and dialogue is happening, things are processing, you're hearing things, questions may come up. And so there is built in there a way for folks to submit questions that will not necessarily be responded to or answered in that moment, unless it just organically does so, because it's around the agenda item, but an opportunity for folks to submit questions that will be responded to through a different method.
Yeah. And so I'll just open it up. We had our first read last meeting, and the idea was we'll have another opportunity for discussion this meeting, and then depending on how discussion goes, there would be the opportunity to actually have it as an action item to approve. And so just welcome any questions or comments. Must have really explained it well by now.
The only piece I just want to, oh.
Wait. Go ahead, Flip.
You can go ahead, Ms. Morris.
I guess I was just concerned about comments at the work sessions. Our work sessions are only an hour long, and those would be at the end of meetings. Okay. So if time.
If at all.
If, okay.
Yes.
And I'm concerned about the president may interrupt, and I understand about free speech and such, but I am concerned about things getting personal or abusive. I just am concerned about that verbiage. But I also understand about freedom of speech. So it's kind of a sticky wicket.
Bridget,
Yeah,
you're muted.
Yeah, that's a great, so in terms of, I believe, I mean, can someone read that aspect of the policy, like what is stated? Because right now it says that the president may,
Mhm.
right? And then if a board member disagrees, right, then they can go ahead and speak up. And then the board can then, with a majority vote, go against what the president says. So that's how, and that actually was in existence
Right.
in the former. So that is, and that's also part of many boards' policies. And so that's kind of how it's written. So with your concerns, would there be changes in language or?
Well, I'm not sure because we have to balance it with freedom of speech and such, but I think Flip had a comment.
No, not relevant to this. So I'm happy to chime in after other board directors chime in.
Yeah, I think on that issue, I think it's fine to request that people be civil. However, because of the lawsuits, I mean, I've been in a few sessions with the attorneys talking about this issue. You can't, and I think for most people, if you ask them to be civil, they will. But if somebody insists on proceeding, it really, there's not a whole lot you can do because that's what the law says. So I think the language in here, which is basically the same language that was in there before, is fine.
And I think there's also cultural considerations in terms of when people feel strongly and are expressing themselves and what is considered to what point, right? Like, and if it makes some people uncomfortable, does that mean that it's not civil? Or is that, like, so what is considered, as well? And I think that sort of speaks to what you're saying, Director Larson, about individual rights and how do we honor how different people communicate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with this. There's a significant change from where we are, but I'm fine. I mean, let's go do this and see how it works. And if we need to make some tweaks to it down the line, then fine. But
The only area,
Go ahead, Dr.
I was
Herndon.
gonna say, the only area I just want to make sure, I spoke with Ms. Chen around the translation services. So I just want to make sure we're able to follow through with that. So there are times when we don't have staff on hand. So I just want to make sure we have that ability to be able to follow through if there's a request. And that we have, kind of a backup to our backups, because if that request comes in at noon on the day of, sometimes it can be a challenge to find someone to help with the translation. So I just want to ensure that we can actually put that into place so that we have multiple avenues to follow through with that.
With the translation request, is it the day of? I thought that there was a little bit more time.
If it's,
Does it say?
yeah, it says by noon on the day of the meeting.
Okay.
yeah, so that's the only thing. It can be a short time frame. So I just want to make sure we've got avenues to be able to follow through with that.
That makes
There we
sense.
go.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Edna.
I was just hoping that we could kind of keep our civility in the workplace on the forefront when these things are happening. Showing respect, courtesy, and concern for the dignity and cultural backgrounds of others. It's just something that I think we need to keep in the forefront as we're interacting with each other and the community. Right, Carly.
I was just thinking about how, even thinking about in our work session, board priorities around interpretation or language access. I mean, I think that we have an opportunity to figure out, more systemic ways that we're providing translation and interpretation in all of our things. Like I would love, and I know it's a cost barrier, but I would love that if we were able to use the amazing interpretation feature on the webinar, right? So that it was accessible already and folks didn't have to ask for it. And I totally hear what you're saying. We're not there yet. So, I mean, I would be open to, at least for now, while we're developing the infrastructure, shifting that timeline just a smidge and even saying maybe 24 hours ahead, if that felt more reasonable as far as like a timeline for Ms. Chen.
Yeah, and I just want to check in with her, because if we have to, for instance, contract with a translation, company to come in, like, I just want to know who's available locally that can help us out, especially if we're doing in person, when we shift back to in-person meetings, and who might be available online, just so that I've got a good time frame. But obviously 24 hours is better than like 5 hours.
A couple other thoughts I have is that if we have relationships with more community members and families, oftentimes a person may want someone they know and trust to be the ones that are translating for them. And so that there's those types of opportunities. The other thing is that in 2022, if this is where our district is at, knowing that we have so many multilingual speakers, this is really problematic. And so really, I mean, honestly, I'm ashamed that I cannot speak more languages than I speak already. It's really thinking about, are we really serving our community in the way that they need to be served? And why don't more of us that are leaders or educators are multilingual and have stronger connections with families where there might be multilingual partners as well? And thinking about going back to the supporting partnerships in education and beyond, all community meetings have opportunities for translation, because all staff bring that linguistic capital and skill to the table. And that's just part of how we do business, right? Like that's how we do the work that needs to be done. And so that's just a thought. I really do think that as a district, we're like late in the game on this one. And so the hope would be that that our community members don't need to adjust for us, that we are responding to where the people we serve are at. So that's what I got to say about that one.
Is there a way that we can share the civility in the workplace with others? In conjunction with our policy?
Do you mean up on the screen right now?
No,
Dr.
just in some manner that we incorporate, that we provide an opportunity for this to be available to explain positions that we might take about public comment. Is that possible?
Could you explain a little? I'm trying to understand, Edna. Will you share a little bit about what are you envisioning?
Well, I'm not quite sure what I'm envisioning, but we've got this policy 5012 about civility in the workplace. And I think it addresses the concerns that I might have about, abusive, irrelevant, those kind of things. I think if we could somehow make ourselves as well as others aware of this policy and share it with them also, so that they're aware that we're using this as a premise for our work. Does that make sense?
I think I see what you're saying. So essentially just
Carly,
bringing awareness to the policy that already exists around civility in the workplace, just kind of elevating it.
Thank you. Yes.
Is that kind of what you were referring to?
Yeah. It just,
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it just seems to mesh together as far as what expectations or requests we might have. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I think I also, in partnership with whatever procedure is put in place around this, I think can also clear up some of that. And I think we could even, I mean, I don't know exactly what goes into those procedures. Dr. Herman, you would obviously speak much more to that, but there might be a place in there to even name like what is like, I don't know, essentially name the thing that could, you know, result in an interruption of your public comment. So it was really clear for folks.
I think the other thing we can do, I was looking at this policy, a lot of policies cross-reference to other policies. So that would be an addition you could just put on the end of this, you know, the, what is that? The civility policy 5012. You could just put that, you know, on the end of this as a policy cross-reference to show that they're tied together, and then yeah, that could address part of that.
It's just there's expectations and then definition of uncivil conduct. Excuse me.
So usually, like what I think, Edna, or Ms. Morris, what I think is what I'm hearing is what I think what you're asking for is a connection to another policy. And that connection to another policy, how I've seen it done is just like what Debbie has pulled up here, the legal references, and then we actually list the affiliated, like which other policies relate to this one. Right. And so that's how I see it happen in policy drafting and like how we do our policies.
Well, and maybe when you do make a request of someone, you know, being more civil, we have this accessible so that we can say, because in our civility policy, we have this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in other words, making that connection so clear that you have something concrete to point back to if and when the president decides to interrupt or terminate a public comment.
Or a board member decides to challenge the determination of the president. All right. Anything else on this one? Well, we can move along to 6B, inclusive spaces update.
Yeah, that's me. Okay. So excited to share a little bit about gender inclusive spaces and kind of really just get the conversation going. This is really pretty much the beginning. I haven't even had the chance to talk to Dr. Hernan about it. So sorry about that, Dr. Hernan, but don't worry, nothing is concrete at all. So as I mentioned a little bit in my director's report, I had a great opportunity to spend some time with a really incredible student at Foster High School, as well as Mr. Weisbecker and Bridget, just talking about some of the impacts of the just the impacts of the non-inclusive spaces that are at Foster right now, specifically when it relates to gender neutral restrooms. And so we walked away from our first meeting, which I believe was maybe 2 weeks ago, with a few really concrete goals that we're hoping to achieve in really quite a short amount of time, because we feel like there is both the infrastructure and the support from building leadership to be able to make some of these things happen. And so those few concrete goals these were actually determined by the students. So one is reopening the multiple gender neutral restrooms at Foster. There was a very short amount of time in October where restrooms were transformed into gender neutral restrooms. There were, I believe, 2 of them that were previously gendered restrooms that were opened up as non-gendered restrooms. And they were quite quickly closed, unfortunately, from what I understand, due to some parallel TikTok related things that were happening unrelated to the gender, unrelated to it wasn't targeted things around gender nonconforming people, but rather just some again, odd coincidence with TikTok. Anyway, so getting those bathrooms reopened. And then the more important piece that the student was really, really passionate about was actually providing a learning and educational opportunity for all staff and students within the building. Because one of the things that they shared is that, particularly around their student peers, they feel, they just have some questions because there are things around gender that they just don't understand because they are cisgendered folks. And so ways in which gender nonconforming people move the world, like many other marginalized groups, there are just some things that, again, folks don't understand. So this student was really intentional about wanting to create opportunities where their classmates could just come and ask questions about gender issues and better help them understand. And same for staff. And so, and then this other concrete goal was to meet with decision makers, being Dr. Herndon, Mr. Blanton, so that we can quickly address this issue, at least at Foster, and then begin the conversations about how we're going to more broadly make sure that we are creating gender inclusive spaces throughout our district, because these things should be in place from our preschool spaces all the way until our high school spaces. So I did have the opportunity to meet with Mr. Blanton, hear a little bit about what has already taken place and what he hopes to see happen. And he seemed really excited about the opportunity for some support from other folks to really help move this along. And I mentioned in my report that on Thursday, I'm going to be meeting with several different students because I want students to be so much of the driver of this work because it is impacting them. Of course, the teachers as well. That are in our schools that are transgender folks or non-binary folks. We want them to, of course, as well feel included. And I've heard a lot of challenges around even the single-use restrooms that still have a gendered marker on them and how that is impacting our staff and our students. And so what I wanted to share with you all tonight was what I've done, which was those pieces, and then what I'm hoping to do in the next couple of months. So we do currently have a gender inclusive schools policy in place. However, as I was reviewing that policy, there were a few things that kept coming to mind. One is if that gender inclusive schools policy were being implemented in ways that were meaningful, then we would have gender inclusive spaces and gender inclusive restrooms in our schools right now. And so and also the policy was pretty much a copy and paste from the WASDA recommended policy, which of course WASDA is helps school districts and school boards all around our state really be able to provide model policies for folks. And those are just model policies. And so the fact that it is the same as what that model policy is kind of tells me that when that was rolled out, there wasn't likely a lot of work done. And if I'm incorrect in this, because again, I wasn't here, I apologize. But it feels like there may not have been a lot of work done to really get buy-in and get thoughts and ideas and collaboration with community, students and staff to actually make this policy our own. And so my hope is over the next few months to really dive into the policy that we have, work with students, work with staff to figure out how we can actually put a policy in place that represents who we are in Tukwila and where we want to go in Tukwila, and then be able to make sure that we have a well-rounded procedure that is actually ensuring that this policy is enacted in a way that is meaningful and not just performative. So with that, just kind of a general timeline and my hope. And so if you're on this call listening in and you are a principal or a student or a staff member, expect to hear from me in the next short amount of time, because my hope is the first step is meeting with Dr. Herndon to get a little bit of an understanding about the current structures that are in place that are supporting the policy around gender inclusive spaces. And then after that, I'm going to start a series of listening sessions. My hope is to do a minimum of 10, My goal, and this is a pretty far-fetched goal, and sometimes I might end up having to go back and be like, I wasn't able to quite do all that, but I'm a big thinker. So my hope is to do 12, at least one session in each elementary school, 2 per secondary schools, because I think I want to make sure that every voice has the opportunity to speak up. 1 staff session per school, and then at least 2 community listening sessions, because I want to make sure that their input is brought in as well. So my hope is to accomplish those 12 listening sessions between March and mid-April. So giving myself about a month and a half. Again, it's a pretty lofty goal. I may not be able to quite do it all. And hopefully with the help of folks, we'll be able to at least get some of it done. And then in April, my hope is to bring a kind of a fresh look about our policy, an updated look, the policy. Oh, that was 14. Thanks for see, I don't do math as fast as, yeah. Anyway, thank you. In April, to bring a kind of an updated drafted policy based on the feedback and the thoughts from and the wisdom from all of those community members and students and staff. Again, with the hope of finalizing that policy in May or June, so that then we can really ensure that we're putting these things into practice and helping our gender nonconforming students and staff feel included and safe in the spaces that they live and work and learn. So that was a lot. Happy to answer any questions.
Carly, how can people, I guess, who do people reach out to if there's community members that want to be part or students that want to be part?
Yeah, great question. So I will type my email here in the chat, and I would love to hear from anyone who maybe just has an idea, or if you want to be involved in helping me with some of these listening sessions, or just want to make sure that you are a part of those. Feel free to reach out to me. Love your feedback, love your thoughts, and love your help.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I guess I was looking through, so the policy is 3211. And there is, I do see a procedure there. You're going to look at the procedure.
Oh.
I do see a 3211.
Is it just not?
Yeah, it's kind of hidden, yeah. What you have to do is go down to the bottom. If you're looking through the policies, if you go down to the bottom of the 3000 series policies, there's a entry that says 3000 series.
Oh, I see.
And in there, you'll see 3211 procedure, transgender students.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for pointing that out. Now I know.
And obviously, any changes in the policy, we look to update in the procedure side.
I mean, it's just useful when you're thinking about, I mean, not that you're going to write the procedure because you don't, but just to be aware of it and know what's there, and then kind of.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think it's actually just a really interesting example, because I slid right on down to restroom accessibility. And it says right there, students will be allowed to use the restroom that corresponds to the gender identity they assert at school. What's interesting about that is if we don't have restrooms that are more than female and male, we are automatically not in compliance with that policy or that procedure, because we don't have bathrooms that represent the gender identity that people identify as. So yeah, thank you for pointing out. And I think that just further solidifies that I think we've got some work to do, both in what the policy is and how the policy is really being implemented in our district.
Yeah, because that's always the question to be asked. It wouldn't be the first time that, you know, there's a policy. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of these, that there's policy or procedure that we have, but is not really being implemented completely or properly or whatever. So, yeah.
For sure.
Awesome work. It sounds like our student advocates are doing some phenomenal work. So thank you for sharing, Carly. All right, we'll move along to number 7, questions only presentations. Any questions for A, financial forecast? Just had a meeting on that one. B, enrollment report. C, monthly budget status report.
Yeah, so I got a question. Is Ms. Birdsong here? Ah, good, she is. So my question on that one is, in the questions related to it in Appendix A, you provided a kind of a breakdown of the ESSER dollars. And I'm curious, I couldn't tell from that, are these ESSER dollars that we have remaining, or are these ESSER dollars that have been spent or spent this budget year, or what exactly is that list there?
Yeah, so the spreadsheet under the columns, so ESSER 1, 2, and 3 are what we have spent this year. And then if you go a step further, it has what we have encumbered. And all this is as of January, end of January.
Okay, so I'm trying to, cross-reference this back to the total number of dollars that we have available. And yeah, it's not really, because I know ESSER $1, we have 1.3 million. And I guess I'm trying to get to the point of how much do we have left? So this is how much you've spent. So let's just take the ESSER 1 column. This is how much you spent this year, and presumably we spent some more last year, right?
Correct. This year we have close to 100. I think it's like 91,100, somewhere around that dollar amount left to spend before it's fully expended.
Okay, I guess that's, yeah. If that would be really useful to add on this chart, then would be, how much is left to spend under each of these categories. Because, yeah, and I know, for example, ESSER 3, we got, supposedly there's, what did I see, $11.7 million of ESSER 3 dollars. So we got lots and lots of ESSER 3 dollars to spend, even if you take into the account the encumbered side of it. So I'm concerned that, I just want to make sure that we've got plans to spend all this. And I guess one of the questions I had was around technology. So you're showing, let's see, technology encumbered for ESSER 3 of $217,000. Do you know kind of generally what that technology is?
I would have to look at the detail to see exactly what that is. I know they were looking to buy more devices.
Okay, probably more devices, yeah. But yeah, because I think we need to look fairly carefully at how to. What I fear is that we're going to get to the end and we aren't going to have plans to spend this money. And I know in technology there's potentially a huge need for technology upgrades, and we should take advantage of this to get that. So yeah, so I'm interested, in adding how much is left in each of these categories. And I think at one point you indicated on one of the charts, when the deadline, when's the deadline date, that kind of the drop dead date at which we don't spend it by then bye-bye, it's gone. So if you had that on this chart, that would be really helpful.
Okay, I'll combine everything for one document.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Veronica, I just have a quick question, and I'm not sure this is the appropriate place to ask it.
Okay.
But I understand we have like 71 Running Start students. And I also understand that they are included in the ratio for the counselors. they're not included in the ratio for the counselors, but they get counseling support from our counselors. So how does that work? And my understanding is also they have sometimes greater needs than the students in the building. So how does that work?
That is a really good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I will have to get back to you, but I do need a little bit more elaboration. When you say, how does that work? Do you mean, how do they get like help if
Well,
they need help within the building?
What's the funding? If they're not funded in the ratio for FTE, and yet the counselors have to provide services for them, then aren't we overloading our counselors even more if they're required to service the 71 students that go to Running Start, but they're not in the ratio of how we compute our number of counselors?
So, yep, I totally follow with what you're saying. But I mean, if you put it into that perspective, I mean, even if you look at like the ratio that they use for nursing or counselors or social workers, that they're never funded fully for all the kids they serve anyway.
Right.
But I mean, you do bring up a good point, but that's just one of the issues that we're trying to deal with when it comes to the funding and not being fully funded.
Right.
It's just, yeah.
And I understand that, but it just seems a little inequitable that our, hey, Dave, can you take care of this?
Yeah, no, that's an ongoing issue with the legislature about getting funding. You know, it's one of the many, you know, the same issue is true for CTE students. We get a lower allocation of counselors for CTE students, which makes absolutely no sense. They're going to, in looking through the budgets this year, they're going to increase funding for that slightly, but not up to the level that it needs to be, which is what the legislature is always doing. They do it partway, but not all the way. But yeah, this is another good issue. And it's going to be true for everybody. Running Start students across the state are increasing, and yeah, it's putting a bigger load on the counseling staff. So it's just another argument in the ongoing argument for more counselors.
And I sense that we're in such a crisis situation. Is there a way that we could use ESSER funds for an additional counselor at this time until the state perhaps comes through with, you know, additional? I'm just think we need more counselors, as you could tell. So.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, that's why I'm trying to get at, you know, how much ESSER dollars do we have and over what period of time, so we can start, yeah, looking at that list. I think that's permissible. We have to check kind of, I don't know, Ms. Birdsong, do you know? Can we use ESSER dollars for more counselors? I think that's permissible.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so we just need to, and we do need to understand, you know, how long those dollars will be around, because, you know, if you hire somebody, you know, with the well, yeah, we can fund you for a year and then you're gone. I mean, that's not where we want to be with counselors. We want them to be around for a while. So, but yeah, that's definitely should be in the discussion.
Right now we have an experienced counselor at the high school, and we also have one returning. So what a perfect opportunity to just flow right into that.
I have two probably seemingly silly questions. On page 7, looking at this chart, I just want to confirm, when it says year to date, that's budget year, not calendar year, correct?
Correct. From September through, it should be January, so yeah.
Okay, and this probably seems like a really silly thing to hone in, but I was just noticing like a huge discrepancy in the actual versus projected around the supplies. So I'm just curious around like what what are things that could be coded to that supply, and then what's kind of like this, I mean, millions of dollars it looks like of just underspending there.
So the year to date, the projected year to date is just a weird calculation, right? You take your 1 divided by 12, I think it's like 0.8 something. I would have to look at the formula, but it's just a mathematical formula.
Right. So I guess, so the year-to-date projection is 3,663,000 $719. $3,663,719. The actual spent is $518,926. So I was just curious, and that was in supplies. Again, this chart on page 7 is general fund year-to-date expenditures. So again, just curious, like what would be an example of something that would be spent with those funds? And then like why are we so significantly under what our projected spending might be?
So supplies are going to be like more of your tangibles, right? Paper, curriculum, anything that is not a service or travel. And so again, when you have a budget of sorry, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but when you have a budget and if you take your medical, so you got your 1 divided by 12, which gets you 0.0083. So it's just a standard calculation. If everything was true, right, you would have what month are we in? September, October, November, December, January. So 5 months of 0.083. So it's just a calculation. It's not that we're behind in the supplies. We're just not spending to what is projected based on a simple formula.
I think the issue, isn't it, Veronica, that we don't, I mean, the year-to-date is projection is assuming an even level of spending every month throughout the entire year. And that's not how we actually buy supplies. We buy them in chunks. Like I suppose it's like toward the end of the school year, we'll be buying tons of stuff for the following school year, something like that. I don't know what the buying cycle of it is, but it doesn't correspond to the same amount each month.
Correct. But if we were, but I just want to make a comment on that. So if we were buying for the following year, it shouldn't hit this year. So that spending would be reflected in the beginning of the year.
So I guess if I understand Director Hoover's especially, she's trying to figure out, are we going to hit, is there going to be a huge increase in spending for supplies in the next few months to make up this deficit, and what is that spending going to be on?
So part of the supplies, so we have ESSER dollars, right? So they're millions of dollars. So that's going to skew all of our numbers, right? We're not going to hit all of our ESSER dollars this year, right? The goal is to get as much as possible. We still have additional dollars that need to be spent. So that number is huge compared to what we would normally do as far as even year.
Okay, so ESSER funds are included in all of this too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that would skew it quite a bit.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay. Okay, sorry. Like I said, I know that might have been a little bit silly question on a weird item, but that helps me make a little bit more sense of more things. So thanks.
Any other questions, or are we ready to move along to action items? So 9A is approval of policy 1430, public comment, with the addition of what was the civility policy to be added in the reference section?
54 something. I'll give it to you.
Where you look at that, and
5012.
5012.
5412.
5412. Okay, so I'll state this again.
Were we also okay potentially adjusting the interpretation from noon the day of the meeting to 24 hours before the meeting?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So let's go ahead. I'll read the motion, and if we get a second, then we can just have that discussion. So, the motion is to approve policy 1430, public comment, with a legal reference to policy 5412 and extending the notification for translation services for 24 hours instead of 12 noon the day of the meeting. So I'll entertain a motion.
So could I do a friendly amendment? I believe the correct policy number on civility is 5012, not 541.
Okay,
So if you,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so motion to approve policy 1430 public comment with the legal reference attached to policy 5012 and extending the translation request instead of the day of at noon to 24 hours. I'll entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion, questions? Seeing that there isn't any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I heard 3 ayes. Unanimous approval. And then we'll move along to item 9C, approval of out-of-state travel requests. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion, so moved.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and second. Any discussion?
I guess I would
Seeing-
just request the folks, it sounds like a really interesting conference. So when they come back, give us some feedback about what they found out.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, unanimous approval. And we'll move along to, is there an executive session this evening?
No.
All right, seeing that there's no executive session, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Motion.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye all. Thank you.
Dr. Herndon? Did Dr. Herndon already jump off? Yeah, okay. All right, good night, everybody.